Once upon a time, just outside a small Japanese village called Higashine, stood two big mountains called Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho. Mount Kurobushi was wrapped in a rich green cloak of countless forests. He soared nobly in the northeast of the town. To the southeast was Mount Suisho. He was named after the Japanese word for crystal, because his slopes shone with beautiful fragments of crystal which glittered in the sunlight. The two mountains did not like each other. Every morning, as soon as the sun rose, they started to quarrel. And each time they shouted at each other, the earth shook and the wind roared. Their arguments caused lots of problems for the village people who lived at the foot of the two mountains. Sometimes Mount Kurobushi would boast to Mount Suisho about his great height, for Mount Kurobushi was slightly higher than Mount Suisho. But Mount Suisho always disagreed, and soon they began to fight again. The earth would quake, and a terrible storm would rise up. So the farmers would have to stop planting their plants and sowing their seeds, and stay at home until the two mountains stopped quarreling. Sometimes it was Mount Suisho who started the quarrel. He would proudly show off his glittering crystal to Mount Kurobushi. "You don't have anything as beautiful as this, do you?" Mount Suisho would say. Mount Kurobushi was furious at this insult, and a wild storm would whip around the two mountains again. Their quarrels went on like this for hundreds of years, and yet the two mountains would never give in to each other. The only good news for the villagers was that the mountains could not move. If the mountains could have moved like bears or wild boars, no one could have lived in the village at all. Fortunately, there was nothing the two mountains could do but growl at each other. One spring morning, as usual, Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho began to quarrel as early as sunrise. But this time it seemed as if the quarreling would never end. It got worse and worse as the day went on. Their arguing became angrier and angrier, and in their rage Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho turned their deepest and darkest color of red. As they fought, the storm swirled around the village and the earth roared back in fury. The village people living at the foot of the two mountains were so scared they couldn't do anything but stay in their homes all day, praying to the gods that the mountains would stop fighting. But Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho carried on arguing even after the sun had set. And from then on they argued day after day, and the villagers grew more and more frightened and worried. The two mountains quarreled on and on, even though they soon forgot why they had started. But still, they just kept on quarreling. Mount Suisho said, "I am stronger than you." Then Mount Kurobushi shouted, "No, I am stronger than you." Each mountain insisted he was stronger than the other. "I can lift the earth," shouted Mount Kurobushi. "Ha, that's nothing. I can tear the sky," Mount Suisho shouted back. But since they couldn't move, neither mountain could prove the truth of their boasting words. And as nobody could settle the argument, the two mountains just kept on cursing and insulting each other. The villagers were now so annoyed with the constant fighting that they decided to do something about it. They decided among themselves to talk to Little Mountain, who lay between Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho. Little Mountain was known for his wisdom. Two men were chosen by the villagers to go and talk to Little Mountain. The two men waited until sunset, when the fighting mountains became tired and less noisy. They set off in the twilight, each with a lamp in their hand, and hurried on to Little Mountain after saying goodbye to the villagers. Little Mountain listened to what the men had to say. He felt very sorry for the villagers who were suffering so much from the two mountains' continual fighting, for he too was annoyed with the endless arguments. "Those two big mountains will never stop quarreling unless they can prove which is the strongest. I guess they will have to really fight. They will have to grapple with each other," said Little Mountain. "But that's impossible," answered the amazed men together. The wise Little Mountain laughed, and he gave them an idea. The two men were not sure about Little Mountain's plan, but they agreed because they didn't have any better ideas. The men went back to their village and told the people all about Little Mountain's idea. The villagers were also surprised, but agreed this might be the only way to stop the two mountains arguing. Early the next morning, all the villagers gathered together, carrying every bundle of straw they had in their houses. With the bundles of straw, they began to make a long and very thick rope. Days passed. Another 5 days passed. On the 12th day, they finished twisting the straw into rope. Not a single piece of straw was to be found in the village, and the rope had become very, very long and thick. Then the villagers formed themselves into two groups. One group walked towards Mount Kurobushi, holding one end of the rope, and the other walked towards Mount Suisho, holding the other end of the rope. The rope was long, thick, and heavy, and the villagers struggled along with it until they finally reached each mountain. Mount Kurobushi, called out the first group of villagers. The mountain, who was of course still arguing, was surprised to see such unexpected guests. At the same time, the other group arrived at Mount Suisho and called out to him too. This is what the villagers said to each mountain. Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho, your continual quarreling has annoyed us for many days. Because of your terrible fights, we have hardly sowed any seeds or planted any rice this summer, and we are afraid we will have very little food this autumn. The two mountains looked surprised and fell silent. The villagers, encouraged by this, held up the long, thick rope and went on. We have a good idea to put an end to your quarrel. Look at this rope. If you both agree, we will tie this rope around you. Then you can have a tug of war to decide who is the strongest. Both mountains thought this was a good idea. With great difficulty, the villagers managed to tie the long, thick rope around each mountain. They asked Little Mountain to be the judge. Mount Kurobushi and Mount Suisho glared angrily at each other. Then Little Mountain called out, "Ready, steady, go!" The two mountains pulled at the rope with all their might, the villagers looking on. Little Mountain called out, "Time is up! The game is a draw!" Both mountains looked relieved. They had run out of breath and had no energy left. "You both did your best," said Little Mountain in a calm but clear voice. "You should be satisfied now, and we can all be good friends from now on." The two mountains nodded and agreed. Little Mountain called out, "Time is up! The game is a draw!" Both mountains looked relieved. They had run out of breath and had no energy left. "You both did your best," said Little Mountain in a calm but clear voice. "You should be satisfied now, and we can all be good friends from now on." The two mountains nodded and agreed. ever since that day, Mount Kurobushi and Mount Seisho have never quarreled again. The peaks of the two mountains still lean forward, as if they were bowing to each other. Even today, when the villagers look at the mountains, they still remember that terrible fight. And then they are happy to see how calm the mountains are now. The villagers of Higashine now call the little mountain Mount Onaka Naoshi, which means the peacemaker.